This video is sponsored by me. That's right. The weekend retreat is happening again this year from the 11th to the 13th of July. And you don't want to miss it because this year we're studying Ecclesiastes. That's right. The book that I haven't been able to stop talking about or thinking about for the last 5 years. We're putting aside a whole weekend to look at it. So email lambda.retreats@gmail.com if you're interested. It's from the 11th to the 13th of July. Whether you're a deeply committed Christian and you have been for years and you want a based environment to have those honest conversations, or maybe you're an atheist, but there's been some part of you been saying, I should give God a chance, or perhaps you're just feeling lonely and isolated in the modern world. Either way, email lambda.retreats@gmail.com and come and join us.
I've invited some of the sharpest minds on the internet to compete in a competition of intellect, cunning, and taste. Welcome, Scott. I'm throwing down the gauntlet. Do you accept the challenge?
How dare he? Yes, I do. Let's duel.
Exactly. Well, as you can see, I've massively overcomplicated the format. So the idea here is you're this knight. And you're here at Lambda's Landing, and this whole island, let me zoom out so you can see it. This whole island lies before you to explore. But the island is riddled with foes, monsters, pitfalls, traps. So as you travel, you can collect gold in your pouch. Yeah. And at any time, you can go back to Lambda's Landing to deposit that gold in the treasury. If you die, you will lose all the gold in the pouch and start again from Lambda's Landing. But that gold is gone. On the other hand, if you go out further towards the edges of the island, there's more gold available out there. So that's the game. The first decision you have to make is which direction you'd like to go in. So you could go towards the Dunes of Dishonesty, the Biased Bridge, the East Crossroads, or the Standing Stones. And depending on which direction you go, there'll be different topics. So as you can see, it's either culture, society, knowledge, or ethics.
God, I better go move on and choosing though, because I should have looked at the format. I'm sorry, and then I would have.
No, I haven't revealed the format in advance to any of my guests, so
okay, right.
Everyone comes into it fresh. I re-explain it every episode, which is probably annoying for people watching the whole thing. But I should say you'll probably come back to the landing at some point, so this decision isn't one and done for the stream.
Oh, okay.
You can go in one direction and then explore a different way.
I wish we could. Is there a flip coin device?
You want a random choice? I was going to make things worse and give you more information. As you can see, this is like a tree of all the different directions you can go in. So if you go to the Dunes of Dishonesty, you can then unlock expression, music, visual arts, storytelling. If you go to the Biased Bridge, you can unlock organization, power, economics, identity, community, personal growth. The East Crossroads, you could get to the natural world, biology, physics, technology, maths and logic, progress. And the Standing Stones, you could end up at justice, current affairs, theology, Christianity, and spirituality.
Well, I think we should probably stick with culture and the last one. It's probably... wait, hang on. Western Crossroads, storytelling tradition. So,
the last one was Standing Stones, ethics.
Yeah, okay.
Let's start going out that direction. No? Oh, you want to go culture?
No, we can do that. We can.
Let's start out towards the standing stones, and I imagine you can head back and go a different way after that. So, if you watch the map, he will start to move in a second. There we go. Towards the standing stones. But,
Onwards.
on the path, suddenly, without warning, who should thunder into view but Sagittarius, a muscular centaur, bow drawn and eyes narrowed with suspicion. And the way this works is I'm going to give you a topic to discuss. So we'll have a brief discussion about it. I will give you various scores on the back end, which then translate to your stats. And then there's some dice rolling that determines whether or not you've defeated the foe.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of steps to go through, but I'm trying to make it as painless as I can. So the first topic to discuss is: are moral values absolute or relative?
Oh, this is good. Well, human, in human Daseins, but Heidegger said that the good is historical, right? That is from the perspective of human Daseins, or the openness human beings that we are from the first Adam. I think the first Adam is relative, which is why you see the heathens sort of reverting to this now as there's a kind of recroachment or a regression back to paganism. This relativeness. But of course, what is a value? Ultimately, they come from outside Dasein. They come from outside this openness, existential being that we are. They come from outside. If you go far enough back, you can sort of see that even in Greek, that it's that the first hermeneutic, the first interpretation is given, rather than something self-generated. But value is a modern. I think we've even talked about this before. Value is a modern propositional technical term that we give things that appear on this side as something under our control. Well, even there's a reasonable understanding that it isn't under our control. Even pragmatists like Peterson will admit that, you can't change your values, but still he technicalizes them as, and of course all of religion as it is for him, as a pragmatist, a historical archetype, a sort of compression of everything that's occurred in the past. But as we know, and if you stare at being long enough, if you contemplate, meditate long enough, it becomes revealed to you that values, as they're originally given, things with intrinsic value, are entities, are angeloi, come from God. And the reason why you don't see that now from your Spurg vision, we live in Spurg vision, essentially, which is how modernity presents to us. Well, you and I don't, but to the degree to which you have contemplated, meditated, initiated, and into the Christian mysteries, is the degree to which how being presences to you changes. Meaning that through that process and through that, the changing of how being presences to you is a changing towards, it's not I who lives, but Christ who lives and acts in me, which is a complete transformation. That's what we're after, really, to get to this place where value is an interaction with a being, because it's become a value. It's become something we think we can control. And the philosophers, some phenomenologists of value tried to do that in late philosophy. around Heidegger's era. They tried to, Hartmann, I think his name was. It's called axiology. This is really a good subject because I know a lot about it. Because
I'm feeling like we've struck gold on this first question here, so keep going.
and so the axiology, and Nietzsche talked about the transvaluation of all value from the will to power. Of course, the will to power is an entity too, and you can take a guess who it is. Satan. And so the transvaluation of all value has already occurred. And we're in a perspective where it can become more and more and more subjective and more as we become more deracinated, as we become more, what's it called? Alienated. Alienation means a separation from the ground of being, the ground of all value, and the true beings which have become, like I said, technical values. They become things that we think we've mapped. And you know that very quickly when you interact with them. If you've ever interacted with Jung sort of got halfway there with the archetypes of the unconscious. He understands what values are very well and came to see that they are not relative. They are relative for now where we are in modernity. So when we talk about it, you don't have access to person watching you. I mean, maybe you do because you follow Luke, but you don't have access to them. You don't see them. So it's relative to you. So yeah, modernity is hell because it is relative there, because you're not at the point where you can dissolve the arbitrariness of what you are. You're arbitrary, and that's why there's all this drift, because of the slow degeneration. Because actually, the ground of reality is moral at its depth, and it's a ridiculous, childlike understanding that denies this. Because what it really wants at the ground of its being, you might not even realize, but what it really wants is to not have any responsibility. So it posits this, there is no ground of, there is no moral ground of reality. It doesn't know this, of course, so it leans on the scientific evidence because it suits its immaturity and its juvenile nature to live the Nietzschean existence, to live the will to power, to live the lie, the lie is more important. There's no truth. It's just power. I suppose we could go
I was going to say, my observation is that people don't entirely buy that moral values are relative, even though that's what they're being told, and even though it does, to a degree, give them permission, it gives them excuse for their behavior. And they probably like that to a degree. But there is this unsettled nature. People, I think it's a very powerful opportunity for evangelism that we can say to people, doesn't something within you yearn for moral absolutism? Don't you actually deeply reject this idea that our moral values are changing and we're just in the shifting sands? That when somebody makes a statement of moral condemnation and there's something within you that chimes with that you want to say you're connecting that disapproval, say, to something eternal, that when you say something is wrong, you're making a claim about it being actual evil and not just the whims of an evolutionary process that has led us to have arbitrary normative opinions, but to actually believe that there is such a thing as good and evil. And maybe there is an appeal to people to say, I can give up the idea of evil, and that means that I can never be condemned. But if you give up the idea of evil, you also give up the idea of good. And to live in a universe, with an absence of moral goodness is actually, an abhorrent and terrifying concept.
And they try to I noticed. Oh, sorry, were you going to continue there?
No, okay. Yeah, I'd finish my spiel.
They try to use the idea of complexity to say, oh, look, there's a moral direction in the universe. The expansion of complexity, which is just another, it's another thing to hang on to. It's ridiculous. Well, it's ridiculous once you've looked long enough. All this stuff is from as Heidegger well articulates from his perspective, that all the scientific data is filtered through the basic concepts of metaphysics, which predisclose the world in advance. It's all filtered through the senses, right? The surface layer. So nothing is taken from the depths. So the science all comes from the surface layer before you've actually contemplated to the deeper faculties that you don't have access to, that someone like Paul does. Or else he would not be able to say it's Christ who lives and acts in me. It's because he has the faculties by grace on his part, pure grace. It's a shock and transformation. But we can do that. We can do that collaboratively with the Lord's help. We can do it. We can put some effort on our part, but also it must be both. I can't remember where I was going with that exactly, but you're about to.
Well, I think we will do battle with the Sagittarius at that turn. I've got good confidence in your stats here. I think you're ready to. There we go. Okay. Success, victory. So as you can see, you've now. It's perhaps the most cutting edge simulation of battle going on behind the scenes. It is, truly a marvel of technology.
Truly a marvel. Truly, it's a Landian style lemurs are behind the programming.
Good. Okay, so now you can continue traveling to the standing stones. There you are. You've made it. Let's bring up your actions. So you can head back to Lambda's Landing immediately to bank the gold, but you will have to refight your way out again. And as I mentioned before, you get sort of exponentially more gold as you go outwards. So your other option is to keep going along the path that you've chosen. And there's two ways you could go: the Meandering Meadows to talk about justice, or the Cliffs of Curiosity to talk about theology.
Probably theology. They sort of unify these things. They're both interesting, but theology would probably be it.
Great. Let's go out that way, along the coast, as it were. Oh, bad news. There's another monster on your route. And the monster is Desmodus. A vampire bat stretches impossibly wide as it lands before you, standing upright like a mockery of human form.
Appropriate, really.
Yes.
Vampire is an opposite, really, of theology. Opposite of what theology articulates is what a vampire is, which is what it's technical, really. Satan is Facebook. That's what it. I mean, that's what a bad vampire bat. That is essentially what all these things are. They're sucking energy. When Alex Jones attacks these people, calls them vampires. His symbolism is usually quite right. He has a good instinct for it. When he called Biden pedophile chieftain was a good one. Although that's not that symbolic, but he would call these people psychic vampires. He'd call like Facebook and people like that. He's got a good sense of symbolism in terms of what's actually what they are. It maps the spiritual condition of those. But anyway, I'll let you.
Well, I'm debating in my mind between two topics. Maybe I'll give you the choice. So either is religious experience evidence of transcendent reality, or is suffering compatible with divine goodness?
Probably the first one.
All right. So is religious experience evidence of transcendent reality?
Yes.
All right, let's move on.
No. Well, I mean, from the mystic perspective, it just becomes completely undeniable because it transcends time. Because the way it appears to you, things are told to you, things are display themselves beyond the object and subject. So there'll be just simple things happening internally before alarm will go off, just all sorts of communications that then again, these are only personal proofs though. You can't use the scientific method, although there has been scientific studies in Nature that they did do parapsychological meta study on everything, and it was above chance. Might have talked about that once before. They've done things about, so there is some kind of transcendent reality that the unconscious itself is transcendent in the sense that it's outside. That's what outside is. It means unknown, unseen, that it's actually quite ridiculous that, but again, we're talking about religious experience in particular though. So that's the scientific data. So the science backs it up that there's an outside, that there's some sort of outside that interacts with us, and there's evidence for that. But in terms of religious experience, yes, knowledge of it is an absolute certain knowledge of it is certain, but it can't be used for the scientific method because it's never generalizable to all people at all times, because you're in the factical world, you're in the normal sensory experience. You have to actually develop the faculties through Christian initiation, through going through the process to actually experience these things at the depths. So, but for the personal, for the experience, you can have that certainty. But it's also a certainty. There's an epistemic principle. There's a certainty of consilience, which means it operates like the senses, how the five senses collaborate for a certainty about whether a Coke can is there. It's the same thing with the different spiritual faculties, but also it makes sense. God makes sense. He is fundamentally ordered. It won't make sense to you initially, of course, because he's a mystery, but it unfolds to make sense because he is the future. And so it will be coherent. So you can use the epistemic principle has the truth criterion of idealism, which is cohesion, but it makes sense. And also at the same time, it has the epistemic principle of, the truth criterion of, or a synthesis of these things of realism, what they call realism anyway, which is correspondence. Those two things have their idols, but when you synthesize, like the thing is an idol, right? The thing in itself. And so there's a correspondence between the senses and the experience, like I was talking about. And then there's also constructive fruitfulness. So there's about 5 different things that come together for a certainty around this. But also then there's intrinsic value. So the Lord, like the fire of Emmaus, did our hearts not burn? It comes with a certainty, as Saint Teresa talks about, as an intellectual vision she mentions. And I've experienced all these things directly. And so all those things come together to have a certainty far greater than you can ever have with science, that there is this. So, but it's for the person. And so it's demonstrated, though, again and again in reality as things are shown to you that occur way above chance. It just becomes completely undeniable, the miraculous that's occurring. And I know all the cognitive biases. I know I've got science books on my shelf. I know all these things, right? So God fundamentally makes sense. Is the truth of the matter. But you have to put the time and effort in, and then He'll show Himself to you. And anyway, so I think the epistemic principle, mentioning that epistemic principle, truth criterion from philosophy, proves that case. Well, it at least you can see how, it reasonably proves that case, that there's an epistemic principle.
It makes me think of the verse from Romans, the Spirit Himself testifies with our spirit and confirms for us that we are children of God. What do you think, though, about religious experiences from, I guess, other religions? So I think you've made a pretty clear case for how we should think about genuine, true interactions with the divine. But what about people who are having religious experiences from other faiths?
Yeah,
How should we think about that? Yeah.
This is a really interesting one because it comes up. People will watch YouTube videos and then they'll make they'll make comments about this sort of thing. The first thing is, do they apply that epistemic principle to the spiritual experience? Usually you'll find no. Because constructive fruitfulness is a huge one. And I actually missed one there, which is the part of the cohesion is with all previous revelation. It's part of the epistemic principle. So, like I said, God makes sense. So it aligns with, because you can be tricked. The devil can trick you, and this is happening with psychedelics. You see, is that he makes it look like a fruit. It's a very tricky one, isn't it? Is that it helps people, but what happens to those people? They end up with this sort of gnostic expression of what is outside or what is the eternal, and then they make no advances in the spirit after that. So they might have been healed from their PTSD, but they end up more materialist, and so they progress towards, the divine. They might say, there's some outside divine, but then they just stop there, or they just keep taking the drugs. So it has one fruitfulness. You see, that's why you need the whole epistemic principle. It has to be coherent with the saints. There's a whole society of people. You can't just be isolated on your own. But in terms of other people's experience, this is a difficult one. I think you can tell the difference. Firstly, a lot of the time, I've got lectures about this in terms of the differences, and a lot of it is based upon the technical for the East and the West. The Christianity and the East, is that at least before Christ came, or if they're staying true to the religion before Christ incarnated, everything they do is technical. It's spiritual technology from the East. It's bottom up. And you can see that in all the texts, is that the mental substance is brought to stillness by your forces. And the difference between that and us is about grace, is that science is brought about, it's effort and grace, in the sense that it's always finally brought about by the Lord. It's not I who lives, but Christ who lives and acts in me, right? So we do our part in our effort and grace, and it's a collaboration. And in the mystic experience, that's what happens, is that when the breath is, another volition enters you and moves your breath, for instance. And of course, it's the Lord. But active and passive at the same time. And so, but then you might have later, after Christ, things change after Christ has incarnated, because it's the middle of time. It's changed absolutely everything. So say you have an Eastern, people will say, it looks like Christianity has influenced this alchemist text in the East, right? They must have got some documents. No. It's because Christ is in the spirit and available in the spirit of earth. He's in the very ground of it. His blood and water went into it, right? After that, he brought himself inside completely. And so that means that after that, he's influencing things. So if that is the case, then I think that he's helping them, hoping that they'll finally acknowledge that it's him. He's hinting. And you see this in the dreams of Muslims. There's a bunch of people that are in their nighttime thing. They're starting to convert, and they're secretly worshiping Christ in Iran. And in, this is happening, you see. Christ acts. And so you might have also, you'll see this detechnicalization in some alchemist texts in the East, where it's Christ acting there. It's talking about following the master and such. Because as the master said, the true master is that those who came before me are thieves and robbers. Those who reach before me are thieves and robbers, right? When they make themselves their own master in the practices, technically, rather than letting me in to influence and give them grace and move through them, like we've talked about a few times when we've chatted, is that this is what happens. because he's the future. They just had the past and the present before. They were impelled from the necessity of destiny, of which karma. That's what destiny is, or it's more karma. Destiny is what karma is. I'm just using our proper words. Destiny is a pressure from what has been, and sin, right? Karma is destined sin. You have a sin that it will fulfill itself unless you, and that's why there was hereditary sin and such, right? Primordial sin before Christ came. These are all destinies and necessities pushing. And a word from the Anglo-Saxon times for that is actually weird. The original weird, before its meaning changed to future weird, which is, something's weird, it's unknown. That was later. But in the Wanderer, he talks about weird being this ice river pushing that he can't get away from, which is because he's had these battles, he's had these terrible times, and everything's been taken away from him, but he's haunted. That's destiny. It's sin, it's past, it's haunting. It's a river that you can't stop that's moving from the past and pushing its destination from the past, which you actually see in technology with satanic technological progress is pushing from what has been. Land thinks it's the future. He thinks it's providence. It's not providence. It's necessity from the past. It's satanic necessity pushing its own fake future from the past. If that makes sense. It's projecting its future from like a progression from now rather than following divine providence. But that's part of the plan as well. So it's all right. Has to happen. The incarnation of the Antichrist unfortunately has to happen. But we have to do our bit on our side. Anyway, we went off a bit there at the end. But
no, that's great. I think let's plug in the numbers and see how you've done against the vampire. Oh, victory. Well done. All right, back to the map.
Technocrats. Over the Landians.
Yes. Yes, indeed. So you were heading to the Cliffs of Curiosity. Oh, he's gone the wrong way. Pretend he's still standing on the Cliffs of Curiosity. I've just made a bit of a mistake there about the coordinates. So from the cliffs, you can either go to the bones. And by the way, I should give credit to Poe, who did the art for me and designed this island and all the creatures and everything. So she did a great job.
That's great.
It does. So you're at the Cliffs of Curiosity. You can either go down to the Bone Stream Beach or the wrecked ship. Oh, and the topics are... the wrecked ship is topics on Christianity, and the Bone Stream Beach is topics on spirituality.
Let's go spirituality, because I think let's go on this subject of countering the horrible lie, the horrible, I imagine it might be about other spiritualities, which is the dangers we're facing. So it'd be good to talk about that.
Great. In that case, let's do, is spirituality, I forgot to change the monster. Well, it's the vampire's back. Is spirituality separable from religion? People will say, oh, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual, for example.
Yeah. Not in the sense that the reality is the church is a wider body that's unseen. The church is also unseen. And so that is the true spirit. I mean, if we're talking about spirit, there's true the spirit, which is outside temporality. It's not, it's eternal. And that's where this place really is. And there's no devoiding that from Christ. He's already, even in the macrocosm, he's completely ingressed and owns the macrocosm since the mystery of Golgotha. So, I mean, he already created it. It was just the problem, of course, was the first wine in terms of temporality, but it being the first Adam. But is it separable? Only in the sense that because there's two realms really that you could articulate. There's two fake. There's the Luciferian spiritual, and the satanic spiritual. And they're characterized by, one is the nirvanic realm of bliss, which is light without truth. So it's like a realm as an offshoot away from the true spirit, which grants bliss, but it's at the expense of conscience and destroys the earthly, right? It's when you want to flee upward like the winged snake. That destroys, because we're supposed to be earth at the same time. That's what Christ is, imitating him. You're not supposed to flee. That was the mistake that the Indians made. It was not wanting to, a fear of incarnation, or wanting to be a part of Earth's future destiny, which God had planned. And so these are very complicated things, but they're the mistakes of that. They're characterized by that. And so in those Eastern religions, they're humanist, right? And what is human fundamentally in the first Adam is it's Luciferian. It's Lucifer, right? We have Lucifer and Satan in us. We have to deal with them. That's where the temptations come from. And so that's that egoistic. And even though they look to escape the ego as well by fleeing upward under their own steam.
That's interesting. I hadn't. Well, I mean, whenever I talk to you, there's about a million connections I feel like I hadn't made. But the kind of Hindu idea where you reincarnate and there's this cycle, and the intention is that you transcend. Eventually, you kind of break the cycle and you loose yourself from the material chains, which has an interesting resonance with Gnostic kind of perception about reality. I guess there's the seed of insight in both of those, which is that the world that we inhabit is broken. But it's an over generalization to say that therefore being embodied is the cause of the brokenness. It's like to say, because we observe the brokenness of our reality, the answer is to flee reality. And actually the answer is we should seek to fix reality, or find the power that is capable of fixing it.
Well, when you articulate, it's like there's four different treatments in the different, when you look back in time there's an ill person. One person says that it's just a cycle and he'll come around again. That's kind of the Greek, that he's perfect how he is. The cycles will return again. And then another person's diagnosis is that he's sick. He's sick. There's no treatment but to just give it, sort of like painkillers, really. It's just which is what we're talking about with the East. There's no treatment to do it, so just let him flee. And then there's also the Stoics, who their treatment was to just go as well. Like noble leaving. I don't want to say the word because it might be.
Yes, you never know what YouTube abides.
But yeah, there's essentially all these different treatments, and the newest, none of these treatments before Christ were the whole thing is to be saved. And you see that now with medicine and such, is that we can treat it. And so, it's the fleeing. I forgot where I was going to go with that, but
well, I think we've explored some useful territory. Is there anything else? And the broader question: is spirituality separable from religion? I guess, for example, is there such a thing as a genuine spiritual experience that's had by a non-religious person?
You don't have to be religious, but it is theurgia. It is God, And what they're saying is that is it going to be separate from an organized church? Or what do you mean
I guess
by that? Because the church
that's
is
a good point.
spiritual.
Let's dig into what do we mean by religious? Because that term can mean different things to different people. So, what to you, if you were to put slightly more flesh on the on the skeleton, what is a religion, and what is its significance?
I guess one way of putting religio is kind of related to, I think the word is originally related to some ritual, but in terms of
that's interesting.
Hang on, what was I going to say there? Damn it! It's popped out of my mind again. I had something.
It feels like there's spiritual experiences which could potentially be disconnected from any kind of tradition or organization. Yeah. And then religion is to do with something that's codified or passed down or has historical roots. And you could have one without the other, right? You could have, let's not pick on any particular denomination, but you could certainly imagine dead churches, right? Going through the motions. They've got the rituals, but no spiritual reality. But you could have the opposite as well. You could have you could imagine, like you were talking about people having dreams of Jesus from Muslim countries. You can imagine somebody who's been brought up in a atheistic context where their whole life, any kind of transcendent reality has been denied. And yet, God will speak to them. And then they're having an encounter in a spiritual realm that they don't have any context for.
I guess you could say that it's a way of putting it is inside and outside in terms of what's known. Although even on the inside of human logos, let's call it, on the inside of it, you don't necessarily know the things you're looking at. You think you know it, but it's known to more people, but they're sort of symbolic, and so they can endlessly disclose more things. But a way of putting it might be the primordial tradition, which is brought inside as religion or authentic religion, tradition, is remembrance. It's like the eternal, the yearly liturgical calendar is a remembrance and presencing of the actual eternal forms of the Christ's aspects, his summer aspect, his winter aspect, his spring aspect, his all these things are always happening in the liturgical calendar. And so that you can't, okay, here's a way of thinking about it too, is that you can't, in terms of potentiality, even withdraw to be able to get to the Spirit without some sort of church in place. It allows for the actual tradition being reenacted as remembrance, allows for the space for even Protestantism to, all these things to be able to withdraw, because without that withdrawal, it would just be all satanic, technical, and framed, and there would be no space so it creates a kind of cultural, or just a space where money's donated, anything that allows people the excuse to be able to withdraw so it can be disclosed at all. So it's almost a non-starter in terms of an argument, because spirituality can't actually exist without the open space to push back, without tradition holding back the dead worlding of the world that will come without that remembrance, because it'll just immediately shut down, because your family will then go, what are you doing? Sitting there. It's like communism, right? In North Korea, they tell the kids in school to look at their parents to see if their eyes are shut for too long, and to report it, to see if they're praying to Jesus, right? So there's an example of it. So if you don't have something holding back, that's what will happen. A dead technical system will ensnare and stop you from actually having the withdrawal. So it makes it possible to do that. But what you're saying is also true in the sense that's providence, is that providence as the father, because what is tradition? The essence of tradition is honor the mother and father. The mother is the remembrance, the father is providence. The mother is like the past that is eternal, that's been brought in, that the liturgical calendar endlessly presences makes possible to presence. And so it's a divine being. The church is the divine. It has its side that you can't see. It's got an invisible side of its organism, like Christ. And Christ is. But people don't get that Christ's right here. Christ is between us. He's right here, right now. You just need the faculties to see and enough time to dwell and withdraw. But yes, there is a sense that providence will grant grace. He is providence. He'll grant grace to people like Muslims, like we said, when they're asleep, and speak to them. He'll influence things outside of the actual remembrance. But the remembrance is required for you to even notice that, because you have to know that Jesus is Jesus, don't you? You have to have some sort of thing there. So in a sense, no, it's not possible. Only a fake spirit is possible as separate from religion, because the satanic will operate. It's part of its trickery, and the luciferic will operate. But no, the remembrance must be there. The one can't exist without the other. The mother is needed to find the father, to know who the father is, to know what providence is, to know it's Jesus. Although, of course, revelation's revelation, but yeah. You don't want to start again.
Speaking of revelation, I had this verse. I've pulled up Revelation 3:20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come to him and will sup with him, and he with me.
He keeps all his promises, man. If you just dwell, if you're there, you're listening to this and you're still here, if you just take the time, if you do your deep contemplative concentration prayer, concentrate without effort and prayer, as it's talked about, this is those words I just used might sound confusing, but it's talked about in Unseen Warfare. It's talked about in the Filio Kalia. These are books from Mount Athos and from Orthodox saints. Concentration is an important part of. You just dwell, if you withdraw, like the Master told us, the Lord told us, that will happen. He keeps his promises.
Amen. Well, let's see how you've done in your second encounter with Desmodus.
Crush the bats.
Destroyed. Victory.
Pagan bats.
All right. So you've got 172 gold. But I reckon having made it to, out to the very end of this path, it's time to go back to Lambda's Landing, stash your gold, and then head back out. Should we do that?
Yes. That was been good so far. There's definitely a lot of good stuff there for the audience.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. Before I forget, I'll click bank so you can see your 172 is safe. No one can take that away from you. Right.
It's true of once got, no one can take the feeling of God away from you once it's happened. Once faith is great. They can't, once it's authentically granted, it can't be taken away. So
yes, the gold in the treasury here is sort of a picture of the gold stored up in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. It is within the universe of the Gauntlet, then the treasury is unimpeachable. It is a fortress of strength.
Yes.
All right.
By dragons.
That's right. So you could head back out in the same direction to the Standing Stones again, or you could go in a different direction. We could talk about something completely different. So knowledge, society, or culture.
I guess we could go culture. We went pretty deep there. I suppose in terms of going back to religion, I think we'd be deepening what we already talked about, but we can go into culture to see the other side of things, because this is the other stream. Spiritually, this is the other side of the stream, because culture is related to spirit. It's the known side of it, the sort of dead side of it. So it might help to see where you should ground the stream and how to reconnect this side of it. Perhaps that might come up there.
Yes, and of course there is a time for everything, a season for every activity under heaven, which is a nice segue, just as a brief aside, to say that one of my primary motivations for doing these Gauntlet streams is as a way to invite people who are watching along to one of my weekend retreats. So I've got one coming up the 11th to the 13th of July. If you fancy coming along for a weekend, we will be studying Ecclesiastes, which is where that verse I just quoted is from, for the whole weekend. And I'm extremely excited because I can't stop talking about Ecclesiastes, and I have been for years. So I feel like it's finally happening. We're doing Ecclesiastes, so you don't want to miss out. But even apart from the Bible study, there'll be, it's a space where you can withdraw from society, much like Scott was just saying. God rewards you for giving yourself the time and the space and the quiet to seek him. And also it's great fellowship. It's great space for discussing with other people of a like mind. There'll be people there who are strong Christians and have been for years. And there's always a substantial number of people who aren't Christians, that they're still figuring things out. But it's a great environment to be in, to ask questions and be really open and honest. So yes, if you're interested in that, email me at lambda.retreats@gmail.com and I can give you all the details.
There's nothing better than to be around. Well, of course, as the Lord said, I'm among you. When there's more than one of you, I don't know the exact quote.
There I am in the midst. Yes,
there I am in the midst. But in this day and age, though, there's a lot of fake and grey. I'm going to say, because I don't want to say the other word, fake and grey Christianity.
Right. Yes, indeed.
Inauthentic people who, unfortunately, they don't even know it. Though they don't even know it a lot of the time. And it's sort of Christ as just a comfort, right? It's like a agreeable blanket, which is not what Christ is, of course, as we know. It's the future. The future has to be, people have to be whipped out of the temple as well for the good to be done.
Yes.
And to be amongst the authentic seeker, like you said, but also in the authentic Christian, the deep, true believer who takes time to withdraw. So both people are there. It's really rewarding to be around authentic people looking, not just turning up, not just mechanically and technically going through the dead propositions, but actually, both seeking, those that are seeking and those who are authentically in contact in a living Christ, the living, existing Christ who's here right now, not outside.
Yes,
man.
giving us every breath. It's really interesting you mentioned, because I do use the term seeker from time to time to mean people who are who've not yet given their life to Christ. The problem with that term, though, is that it implies that there's not an ongoing seeking that we are all doing. That there shouldn't be a time when we feel like we've arrived and we kind of sit back and relax. Right? There's always we're in a race. What is it? Pressing on to reach the prize for which we are called heavenward in Christ Jesus.
I think a good metaphor that I discovered recently when I was reading Unseen Warfare, which is a great text which is edited by two Orthodox saints. But I thought of a better metaphor because they didn't have these things, is that spiritual development is like blowing up a balloon. If you stop, the air comes out. The virtues, the air comes out of it, right? Well, in terms of virtue, it's like that anyway. Like, because part of spiritual development is working on the virtues, but there is a stage where your faith can't be taken away. That the feeling of the presence of God can't be taken away. That's something that's always there once it's established. But beyond a certain point. But in terms of virtues, though, working against your sin, if you stop working, you're always developing. You're always moving forward towards union. Always moving forward. So that's important to recognize. Like when you're on a journey of a distance like this map, you get tired and you stop and you're still in the same place. But when it comes to virtue, you've got to keep developing. You've got to keep the virtues up. You can't just go, I'm gonna fall into sin again. Right? Oh, it'll be all right. I'm still in the same place. No, you have to blow the balloon up again. You know, if you with virtue. So you've got to keep going. Got to keep developing. But with the balloon, it's like, you know, when you blow up a balloon, it becomes easier as you go. So it's really easy once it gets really large, right? That's virtue. It's built up in you, and that's virtue.
Work out those spiritual muscles. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Dragoon has crossed your path, and is going to ask you a question, and the question is globalization positive?
I thought it was going to go into like a culture, as in
there are, if you keep going outwards, there's more specific. There's questions on music or film or things like this, but we're still on the first step out on the path is a very broad topic, and you kind of narrow in as you go.
Is globalization positive? It depends what does positive mean in the sense of to whose moral. It's like this connects to the moral. Our moral is value. Positive suggests value.
Yes.
And if value is relative, then as it is to a globalist. But is it positive? Perhaps to the utilitarian. From our perspective, is it? From the perspective of the divine? Let's just take it from our perspective. Right, I guess. Is it positive? Is it a good? Is it a good?
Because you could argue that, yes, the fact that the world is connected means that people are able to hear the gospel.
That's where I was thinking. On
the other hand, that there are clearly ways in which we now have this this mixing of a million different ideas and thoughts where they're all kind of polluting each other. And so it's a bit like if you stare into the abyss, beware that the abyss does not stare into your soul in turn. So yes, we in a global society can have an influence as Christians to bring more people to Christ. On the other hand, you can't help but notice that there seems to have been some watering down of a lot of churches where they've all become kind of soulless not all, but you know what I mean, that a lot of churches are a bit like corporate generic soulless spaces that are trying to be welcoming to everybody, regardless of if you're coming to the church seeking Christ or not.
And it's like cream rises to the top, people used to say, right? In this world, when it's so full of garbage, because there's a great benefit, it was for me with mysticism, to be able to find on the pathway towards truth, to be able to find all the ancient documents, all the ancient texts, and have that readily accessible. But there's so many things that allowed me to be lucky with that. But it helped that. Let's link this with technical connection, globalism, because I'm trying. There's cross things with this too. Is technology a benefit, and is the globalization and the interconnection a good thing? Yeah, yeah, it is in terms of finding the truth, but in terms of the attack and open to spiritual attack, because the
Right.
internet immediately opens you to spiritual attack and temptation. It's Seraphim Rose said that what the martyrs faced with physical torture, we're going to face with psychological torture, which is in
Wow.
terms of our attention and our homo provoked, as I've talked about before. It's going to be there's going to be two different races, I suppose you could call it, in the future as the apocalypse, and there's signs that these things are coming about. It'll be the people of Christ, and it'll be the people of wrapped up in the homo provoked and Satan as a extension of fake freedom that the prodigal son articulates well, is that fake freedom, but actually you're provoked by the desires of the world, the desires of so the benefit is you can find the truth because you have access because of the technology, but you're also under complete siege, and you end up with hollowing out. And so this, like I said, the cream rising to the top, that's no longer true, because in a world where there was a limit to who had the pen and who had there were certain filters that allowed the cream to be noticed by certain gatekeepers. In a way, the record industry was kind of a good example of that, is that some really important works that would never get made now because of popularity, it's all driven by clicks and popularity now, but when there were these middlemen and gateways, and that sort of stopped things, it allowed some great works that would never get made now to occur, because there were these decision makers with power. And so there's an argument to be made that the greatest works that and I've even experienced this, the deep works that I know, and you'll even find this as a Christian, is if you're an authentic person, even you have substance, and even if you have been given, you have authority, and I'm talking about divine authority, right? If there's something, you've got genuine faith being given to you, and you've got people who just chase clicks and news cycle, it floods out, because I think, look, the authority always will eventually, once it's degenerated enough, because the news cycle just won't generate the interest from people. They'll just start getting sick within. They'll just say, oh, I just feel like none of this is giving me anything. They will seek it out, but there is a sense where it's the signal and noise. It's really hard to determine what's signal and what's noise. And so God, I think the Lord is going to help a lot more with that in terms of granting authority to certain people. And yeah, so I think we've listed some advantages and disadvantages there for this question. But substance,
very good.
Yeah. Sorry. Yep. Jump.
I was going to say, shall we do the fight, as it were?
Yes, that's fine.
Let's take on Dragoon. Let's sort of walk Dragoon. Oh, you lost the battle. Although it doesn't actually make any difference, because you didn't have any gold, and you hadn't got anywhere. So that takes us back to Lambda's Landing. Now I noticed that we've gone past an hour. So do you want to just do one more quick expedition, or should we leave it there? What do you think?
Whatever you want is fine with me.
Let's do one more.
Okay.
Good. I just got to click some buttons to get you back to Lambda Landing. So which way do you want to go? Culture, society, knowledge, or ethics?
It just depends on what the question ends up being, right?
True. Should we go society?
Yeah, I'll let you choose because you know what the questions are. You can guide it to somewhere where it's...
Well, the knowledge path actually has like this little quiz. It's a bit different. So if you fancied a light-hearted, a bit of an easier finish, then we could go that way. Or another, for a slightly meatier topic, we could go towards society. So what do you fancy?
Let's just do the quiz, I think. Just as a
all right.
way to finish it. Yeah.
Good idea. Okay, so towards the east crossroads. Let's do that.
This could be bad. I think I suck at quizzes. Sure,
All right.
Have flashbacks of pub trivia nights and getting nothing.
Yeah, well, this is what you're about to experience, but in front of an internet audience. So, okay. Question 1. What is the only planet in our solar system that rotates clockwise?
Oh, this is gay. Let's go back where we were. Sorry, so let's go back to the other subject. This is going to be so cringe. Let's not do it. Not that it's a cringe segment. I just feel I'm not going to get any of it right. Go the other way.
Okay,
Turn back.
very well.
Failed. Well, point score.
Yeah, that's okay. I've just got to press some buttons to get that to happen.
I had an intuition just to go the original way, but
well, you second guessed yourself. Okay, so questions on society. Maybe this will be a nice kind of a nice one to finish on. How does the society in which you live compare to societies in the past?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting question, because there is a certain degree of, on the question of value again, really, there's a certain degree of similarity in terms of because before Christ came, there was that's why the Phariseeism happened. There was a concretization that led them to be rigid in their low cunning. The Pharisees, their low cunning, the way their intellects work, which you kind of see in the low cunning of the groups that are connected to those Pharisees now. But there's a kind of low cunning in it that works for a logic of how to calculate victory in facticity, in the physical world for material gain, that speaks to the because what the concretization is Satanistic. It's which is what's happening with modernity. It's a removal from the ground of value that leads to the dead removal of way and life for a kind of fake truth. But the truth can't exist without the way and life with it. It's not the truth unless it has those two things with it. And so this happened before Christ came. There's from the fall, it moves from the fall to the middle of time where he comes, right? So there's a kind of similarity between right before he came and now. So in terms of looking in the past, in terms of how bad it was, even though there was a people that had, of course, the preparation was made for Christ to incarnate. But Rudolf Steiner talks about this well, is that we're not in the Kali Yuga now. The Kali Yuga was that point right before Christ incarnated. That was the Kali Yuga, and that ended then. And we're sort of just coming out of it. And so as it leads towards the different epochs in the apocalypse, right? And so there's a similarity. We're definitely at the end of a cycle that's connected to the end of the cycle when Christ incarnated. So there's kind of a similarity there with that, where value is, where the death is. And so there's a similarity there. We're very technical. And so there's a kind of opposite thing going on too with, we have an incredible, Faustian man has this incredible control of apparatus of the physical world, but he's completely bankrupt in the spirit, which is kind of opposite to where when you first, in Greek times, I suppose you could call. Well, actually, you did see that in the Plato and Aristotle. That was the end of the first beginning. There was sort of a death there too, of a connection to the spirit. So there's but there are. Yeah, the opposite is well articulated in the difference between Lucifer and Satan, is that early times in early societies were permeated by Lucifer. And so, like I mentioned before, with the desire to leave, the desire to flee upward. And now we're sort of these are decent comparisons anyway, to make, but we sort of see a deep burrowing into the physical. In modern times. It's about to reverse, though. You can see this with the rise of fake spirituality, the rise of... So materialism has passed its peak, that burrowing into the material. Yeah, but how does it compare? That's how it compares spiritually and valuatively. It began with Lucifer, the middle of time was Christ, and it ends with the incarnation of which you sort of see with AI, a more and a greater ease. We see that as an evolution, the technical, but it's actually a devolution. It's an opportunity for us to go home to the Father, but it's actually, physicality is just going to become more concretized, more crystallized, more bark, and less connection to. But it's an opportunity for, like I said, those two races, you could call them, those two different streams of humanity. One, the satanic, that goes all in on that Landian stuff. And the other side that takes it as an opportunity to move towards Christ, which is the true pathway we're supposed to go on to develop spiritually, to return to become the new Adam, not the old Adam. And so, yeah, it's similar so there are similarities and there are differences, but it begins with Lucifer and it ends with Satan, essentially, in terms of where it's going.
So it's interesting that you say we are more material than ever, because in a sense, I feel that people are more disconnected from their bodies than ever, that because we all live these virtual internet lives. And also because of, I mean, what is the transgender ideology, if not a claim about there being some sort of disembodied self that has a gender? It's a very non-material thing to claim in many ways. It's like, here I am as a being that has been put in the wrong, quote unquote, the wrong body. Well, you can't claim to be in the wrong body if you are a materialist, because as a materialist, you are a body. So but I also agree in the other sense that there's a deep rejection, a sort of ironic detachment from an earnest embrace of. It's like we have these hidden beliefs that are popping up in things like transgenderism, but the kind of acknowledgement of it in polite society is an embarrassment, that we are all supposed to pretend to be completely material. So it's, as opposed to, say, the hippie movements of the sort of 60s and 70s, I wonder if we had a swing towards materialism in the 90s, and then we've kind of floundered back towards something, I don't know, something weird and ethereal. I always feel like my existence online is a bit of a weird, like both of us right now are communicating to who knows how many people, but they are both in the future and they are experiencing us as a digital fragment that their brain is reconstructing as a person. But we know, especially with the rise of generative AI, that those fragments can be illusions. So we have now this kind of fragile tendril of connection to people that we try to rest on it as if it was a real relationship, but it's this weird. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. There's what's coming. It's like I said before. We've passed that point of materialism where it was, and it's now going in a weird sort of oscillation. Because what Lucifer and Satan like to do is to create an oscillation between them. between the hypnotic objective in the world and the seductive subjective, you could call it an oscillation. They want to keep you in chaos between these two things: a wounding of the ego, and a desirous ego, and then an attack from the world, and then and that keep you in chaos so you can't find order. And so what happens in sort of postmodernity and what's going to happen is the next move is fake spirituality. They're going to use remote viewing, ayahuasca, and what they're going to do is that it's going to allow for the appearance of spirituality for people, but all that's going to be subjectivized. It's not the objective spirits. It's not the universal. It's something that's alienated, yet it will appear as wisdom, like you see with psychedelics, right? But like you said, there's this alienation, this is splitting apart of everyone. So the subject has no more commonalities anymore, even subjective commonalities, and also even the faculties that the way out is going to be masked over by the false spirit, which will appear like it's some universal knowledge, but it will be subjectivized and mistruth. So it's really interesting you mentioned the transgenderism thing. I just want to be careful with the word I use because I use the wrong jargon. That's not good. Really, he's the ultimate end. He's the Übermensch. All the Nietzscheans, like these people are your people. They're your people because they deny. All that matters is the powerful truth. All that matters is there is no truth. It's the lie that becomes truth. It's from the ground of chaos. It's the transcending, or in a Luciferian way, transcending the will to power to transcend whatever thing you're stuck with on raw will on its own, to bootstrap rather than facing conscience, like I mentioned before, rather than altering reality itself. That's why you see hyperstition as well going on. But yeah, that's my take on it.
It's very interesting. I hadn't thought about this, but yeah, we had the time of the new atheists. Then we had the time of Peterson, let's put it that way, which was difficult to process, I think, as Christians. A lot of us, but perhaps myself included to a degree, were quite excited that it was now cool to read the Bible and take it seriously and treat it with some reverence and talk about it in terms that seemed real. But in many ways, it was perhaps a dangerous move, in that I think when the battle lines were so clearly drawn, atheist versus Christian, then if somebody had been buying into atheism and then realized what was attractive about Jesus, then they would kind of go across no man's land and become a Christian. Whereas now there's this kind of distraction, this light that seems to hold out the opportunity to have a bit of the thing that you find attractive in Christianity, but without taking it all the way. So you can kind of, it offers you a false version of the truth.
Yes, it does.
And plenty of people through Peterson. I mean, I know of many people who watch this channel who have come through Peterson to a genuine faith, even if Peterson himself has not. But it reminds me of this story from Acts, where do you remember the disciples were being followed around by this slave girl who was following Paul and saying, "These men are servants of the Most High God who proclaim to you the way of salvation." And at some point, Paul gets really annoyed with this girl, and turns around and says to the spirit, "I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of you." So this slave girl had a power of divination, and she was saying a true thing about Paul. These men are servants of the Most High God. But Paul turned around and rebuked the spirit and sent it out of her, because although it had magical powers, and although it was causing her to say some true things, I mean, what does the devil do but say true things with false implications? So
incredible.
I think you're totally right that as the world continues to change, we need to be on our guard that we don't get swept away in excitement when things like embracing. So you could say, "Oh, Peterson, he's very academic. He's got quite a dry reading of scripture." But there's this new movement that's embracing a kind of vivid, experiential, spiritual version of Christianity, but it could still be a lie. So we need to be rooted in truth, rooted in scripture, rooted in Jesus, and and weigh everything. Isn't that what the early church were instructed? That, you know, they were in this quite ecstatic, exciting environment where people were coming and saying, "I've had this vision, I've got this prophecy," and they were told, weigh everything. Weigh everything against scripture. Yeah,
is incredible. I'll go and read that and revisit it, because this
Acts
is
16.
So incredible. It's exactly what happens in your ascent up Dante's Inferno, right? Because hell is real, and it's just here. It's here. This modernity is hell on earth, in the sense that it's hell for many. I've been in hell. I've been there, and most people, half the people watching are still there. It happens here and now, and so can heaven for you can come as well. But this point of, by ascending the ladder, but this point of divination, because look, Peterson was helpful to me too. But if he is anything but a bridge, it inverts. If anyone gets stuck there or stopped there, same with John Vervaeke, right. These are technicalizers. This is the Eastern problem. It's the most pressing and dangerous issue in the truth of he who is the technicalization of the people attempting to make a religion that's not a religion, like John Vervaeke. He's even helped people like Oren McIntyre. He helped me too at a very early time, right? Philosophy can be helped. But again, remember, in Dante's Inferno, Dante's divine hierarchy, philosophy is at a level in purgatory. It's not in heaven. If you get stuck there, it's a demon. So it inverts straight away. And there are a lot of people who are stuck there. They're stuck at Peterson, they're stuck at Vervaeke, they're stuck there, right? And they're demons. And this applies also to divination. It's the same thing, is that the Lord is okay with it. Like, some people find that, like, land or whatever, through divination, that, oh shit, magic's real, right? And then they end up with God. But he doesn't want you to keep doing it. You have to let it go for more deeper faculties, right? You have to let it go, because divination is forcing a reply. And so this archetype of Paul is perfect for that, is that she's got the truth. Like the Lord even can speak through that sometimes. But ultimately, if you get stuck there, it's opening you up to other forces for one. But if you get stuck there, you're ruined. You're ruined. It has to be cast out for the deeper faculties. And this is why all the magicians, all the people who, like the French magic people, you know where they ended up? They ended up letting it all go for mysticism, for the raw experience of God, and went back to the church and everything, because they saw that it was true and real from that, and they abandoned it all because it holds you back from your true development towards the having Christ live and act in me, which is ultimately what we want. Him to be a fact of our experience mystically and here and in the blood, literally in the blood and in the breath and everything. And that can happen if you know, throughout the process of initiation, throughout the process of the Christian life. But yes, if you get stuck there, and I've never had the chance and opportunity to talk about this before, so I'm so glad you mentioned that quote, is that these people are incredibly dangerous. And people think because they're nice, that John Vervaeke, they're nice, they're technicalizers. If you technicalize, right, on the mystic path, when you're trying to, and I've experienced this, is that because the Westerner is willful, he wants to enact things. I want to just do the practice and concentrate and bring silence to my mind and reach God under my own steam. He doesn't allow that. It's active. You got to let go to that active passive, right? And the technical stops you. And that's the danger of the East. And you end up in a false spirituality and a false truth, a false certainty.
Yeah. Yes, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. There are not alternate paths to God. And he says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven.
Yes.
Many who say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. So let that be a grave warning to people listening. Are you planning on that final day to go to Jesus with your long list of I said, Lord, Lord, I did all these things, I drove out demons. Maybe driving out demons isn't the, you know, recontextualize that for yourself. What is the equivalent thing that you are substituting for an actual relationship with Jesus? If you don't know Jesus, then all of your other practices are null and void, because he's not a good that can be substituted. You can't be like, Jesus wasn't available, so I picked the next nearest thing. I found something close. Like you need the genuine article. There was only one man who came to earth to die for our sins, and everything else. Everything else you can do in your life is secondary in comparison with grappling with that reality and deciding what you're going to do about that, about him, about his offer.
And that's the thing, though, is that it must be, you've got all these people that debate online, and they serve a purpose, sort of like Vervaeke, they serve a bridge purpose, right? They're in the church, they're even Orthodox. But ultimately, I look and I think, you're wrapped up in the will to power. You're needed. I'm not going to attack you, because that's just not the way to be anyway. Unless you're following divine will distinctly, which we're going to get to with what I'm saying. But they're not in contact with divine will. They don't have the intuitions. They don't have him acting in you as a fact of experience where you can communicate and find out his divine will. So what must happen, and these people that are in this attack mode, they might be guided to do that by the Lord after they purify themselves, though. There must be a single-minded focus towards the disclosure of divine will, because it's so hard to figure out how to do it. And it's you need this withdrawal from facticity in the world and deep contemplation and meditation to discover it. And then you have the relationship that Christ is talking about there. Then you know you've done because you have to figure out what his will is. How do I know that I'm right about what his will is, that I'm not wrong? Well, that's what the epistemic principle's for, working that out, right? But also understanding what the difference is between those different intuitions and those feelings that come, because there's different types of revelation that he speaks sometimes, like the shepherds of Bethlehem. That's one characterization. And the other characterizations like the Magi, right? It's like the star and the different faculties, though, that are related to this, and intuition. And the epistemic principle is something you build up to work out. So you make sure you're following it. But there's not a single-minded focus out there. It's toward putting the time in and practice in to discover his will. And that's what we need now. Because if you're guided by him, you'll be guided to do things through the conflict of duties. So you'll have a duty to someone as a friend, but you might be for the good. They might be deluded or something. And you want to just placate that. Not placate, but you want to be polite. So you don't want to do a certain thing, right? You just, I'll be nice to them. They're a friend. Ultimately, because his morality is from the future, he's thinking of their he's thinking. His plan is about their potentiality, right, in the future. So you might be directed to do something that severs you as friends, but helps them ultimately. Stuff like that, right? You do something that normally you wouldn't want to. You might consider not a sin, but a bad thing to do, but ultimately it's for the good. And so he negotiates you through all of those things. And you're going to have to do stuff in that will make you a target, because you will bring shame and fear to others. You bring shame and fear to others when you represent spiritual truth, when you represent his divine will, when you have proper contact with him. It brings shame because they have to acknowledge their sins, right? And the devil in them causes them to cover that up. So they look to attack, or they look to, So it's, but the point is the single-minded disclosure of divine will is so incredibly important. And these technical things, these Petersons, keep you away from that. They keep you away from that. If they're okay as a bridge, but I think enough people have gone through that bridge now that we can just say these are not helpful. These people are not helpful now. We have to make clear the distinction between how dangerous they actually are as technicalizers of the true spirit.
Yes.
And we can do that in a philosophical way that's very clear and true. That will work for the rational mind. It's not something that's just going to be. Mysticism is exact, is what I'm trying to say. Mysticism, and Steiner was important in that, actually. But mysticism is something that's very clear and has great philosophical coherence when you properly understand the philosophy as well, and it can satisfy the most rational hard thinker at the same time as the person that has the proper faculties and has developed them. So
right, let's do our final bout of combat.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good too. We did a good job of that. Because it was us. It was a tag team. There's subjective votes on your part, right? So
yeah, I mean,
think together we actually got. There was some good points there, I think.
Let's bring you back to Lambda's Landing, and let's bank your gold, and that leaves you with a total of 193, which is an excellent final score. But maybe more importantly, we've had a superb discussion. Thank you so much for joining me and playing the Gauntlet 2025. Do you want to plug anything? Where can people find you?
I guess if they're interested in anything that's been talked about today in mysticism and actually taking the practice of that to disclose him as a fact of experience, moving towards that experience that Paul talks about, just go to my YouTube or search my name, Scott Manion, and you'll find the lecture series right on that front page, the practices of initiation. And that's it really. It's just so people can find the resources to get started is the important thing. So,
yeah, fantastic.